Hey guys, welcome back to Optimistic Business episode 3 with me, Rob Williams. And today we have a very special guest for you today. His name is Chris Grimes. He is CEO of Second Curve, which is a coaching and consulting company in terms of communications, as well as being the artistic director of Instant Wit, which is a improvisation comedy company. How are you, Chris?
I'm very good, and I say very because you've given me 6 verys in my introduction, which is very kind of you. I feel very, very happily placed, and let me stress the word very in a good way. Thank you for that glorious introduction.
Yeah, that's okay. By the way, guys, I have to admit something today. This is more like episode 3.5 than it is episode 3, because Chris and I filmed a lovely episode yesterday, and I basically botched the recording somehow. So it's in the cloud somewhere, hiding from me, and I can't find it.
We did some gold and some alchemy, which has been sort of twonked into the ether. So good luck finding that.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the stuff you hear today is stuff that we've possibly already talked about, but it's going to be just as golden and just as fun, because Chris and I love to have fun together. For someone who I've met...
Sorry to interrupt you. Because of my comedy improvisational background, when we do a comedy improvisation show with this mindset of yes and, we'll never repeat stuff that we've done before. So this is a new day, a new conversation. We can dig for new gold and new alchemy in what we talk about.
Absolutely.
I promise. So yes, let's do this.
Yeah. I am Spartacus. Let's do this. Right, Chris, let's have a quick word for our lovely audience today. How have you gone from starting as a young boy doing beer commercials to being where you are now, CEO and founder of more than one company, which is unbelievable? And at what point did you decide, actually, I'm probably not going to be a celebrity actor necessarily? Actually, to be fair, you've done a lot in the acting world for someone. I don't want to say for someone. You've just done a lot in the acting world in general.
I've been around. I'm fairly old. I'm quite experienced. Yes, I've done a lot of different stuff, and it's this idea of, the modern imperative to do a portfolio career. That's a really good thing. Don't just be one thing. Do lots of different things. Go where your passion is. Go where your interests lie, and get up, contribute, participate, and you can find yourself in all sorts of different situations, fueled by this mindset that I love to this day, which is yes and, this idea of anything is possible. I mean, of course, not everything's possible, but just having a positive mindset of how you get up and contribute each day is just really important, particularly in modern times too. So to your question about how I got here, you'll remember there was a seminal video years ago where Steve Jobs, Captain Apple back in the day, obviously before he died, did that brilliant video where he was talking to Stanford graduates, and he talked about how all of us can, when you look over your shoulder, join the dots up backwards as to what brings you here today. So the path makes sense when we look behind us. And of course, the big challenge, which is why I love coaching so much, I don't have all the answers, but I think we all have inner reserve and how to find the answers. But the struggle about how we join the dots up towards our future is where we feel so stressed. And so what I love in coaching is this idea of the inner genius, tapping in on the inner genius, the version of you, me, us that's in flow and knows what to do. So in my own path and journey, I lived in Uganda between my being 2.5 and 10. That wasn't me being monumentally independent and going myself, obviously, at 2.5, because that would have been a bit comic. But my father was a teacher for the British Council. And so I had this extraordinary childhood of between 2.5 and 10 living in Uganda. And interestingly, during that time, I was introduced to my all-time comic hero, who to this day really informs what I do even now, which is a black and white TV set hummed into being, and then Stan Laurel from Laurel and Hardy launched onto a screen. And I was absolutely gobsmacked by how someone could be so humble, so kind, so funny, just so innocent almost in his humility and how he came across. And he inspires me to this day because he reminds me to keep it. If I ever feel down, I mean, even this morning I was looking at a Laurel and Hardy forum and just looking at a Laurel and Hardy clip. So I was introduced to Stan Laurel. That really, I suppose, began to flex a comedy muscle for me. And then wind forward to when I first started at drama school. Who influences us, who we admire, often then percolates through our own resonance of who we want to become and who we are. And when I first graduated from the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, many years later, I've skipped many lily pads in terms of my journey, but I got my first ever theatre notice, which was a hapless hypochondriac called Lomov in a production of Chekhov's The Proposal, which I did at the Bristol Old Vic. And the theatre notice was the star of the show was the pathetic Lomov, played excellently and with fine timing and shades of Stan Laurel by Chris Grimes. And I couldn't have been happier, because it meant that there's some core in me that, as I say, even to this day, reminds me to keep it kind and humble and, don't be arrogant. Humility is what's going to get us through. But also don't just be humble to the point of self-effacement. You've still got to state your truth to the world without unwarranted doubt. So, I may be humble, but I'm extremely opinionated. And that's another way to get where you want to get to. Have an opinion. We did talk about this yesterday, but the quote that I wanted to make sure we still keep in is this idea of never ask permission in order to survive. And in current times, that's what's, we've had the biggest dystopian test to our resilience ever, in modern history, I suppose. There's been lots of wartime analogies about fighting the pandemic. Actually, it's not a war, but it's still, it's the biggest unprecedented modern challenge. I'm jumping about all over the place, Rob, but it's all good.
It's all right, Chris. I really actually empathise a lot with about 74 of the things you just said, which have been absolute gold dust as always. When you were talking about kind of just not the Steve Jobs thing, not being able to see the dots forward. I think it's great how you've almost seen your hero and used him, Stan, as a roadmap to see kind of where his dots have been. And you've been like, oh, I can kind of do that. I'll put my own flair on it. So my first dot might be slightly to the right or behind of his or wherever, but you kind of use his map as a roadmap for yourself. And that's forged you, just like other people have seen, like your review, and I can see it as well. You're one of the funniest people and the humblest and kindest on the internet, I would say personally. Definitely, guys, if you're listening, check out Chris on LinkedIn. He posts some great stuff. So almost following that roadmap has, in a way, led you down the same path, which is great because that's exactly where you want to be.
And in fact, coaching, as you said, following a path. My company Second Curve is this idea that we're all on a trajectory or a curve, but your curve begins to wane. So as your curve wanes, what do you do to pull yourself towards your future? In other words, how are you going to get your second curve going? And in life, when your curve wanes and you feel a bit meh, if you're not particularly emotionally intelligent, the curve flatlines and then life's a bit shit and then eventually you'll do something about it. But the whole point of the second curve in an emotionally intelligent lens is you should be actually thinking about getting your second curve going even before your first curve has waned. So it's rather mathematically called a sigmoid curve. So it's a curve that, a bit like looking at a series of mountainscapes in a kid's drawing. You should get going with your second curve, and the second, don't be complacent. What's next? And coaching for me is about bringing people to this idea of a clearing, which is actually like a comedy improvisational clearing, where it's an empty space brimming and charged with potential, with an attitude and mindset of yes and. But in this clearing, it's all about the relationship, stupid. And as I coach people, the relationship to ourselves and to the world in which we have to, navigate. And in the clearing, what choices can I make? And day in, day out, coming back to your lovely point about Stan Laurel being like an echolocation, it's this idea that, there's a yin and a yang. I can make choices perpetually, day in and day out, that are almost binary. Is this going to help me with the cut and thrust of humility, kindness, and direction? Or is this actually going to be irrelevant? So there's sort of energy that contributes to your circle or your clearing, and there's energy that dissipates from it. So we can make choices in how we get up each day, how we show up each day, And by the way, my favorite quote about leadership, and I do coach a lot of leaders within the world as well, is my favorite quote. We can do whole degrees and whole life quests for what leadership is, but actually my favorite quote is, leadership is how you turn up, or how we turn up every single day in, day out, day in, day out. And if I may, one of my very, very favorite stories about how to turn up people is a lovely, have you heard, Rob, by the way, of human beings being analogized to radiators or drains before?
No, absolutely not.
Some of you who are listening may well have done, but if you think about it, it's quite a nice sort of two extremes. A radiator, as we know, we what do we get from a radiator? We get warmth, we get a positivity, we get an emanation of something that's attractive, and you want to, oh, you know what, I could almost warm my hands on you in an I mean, then on the other end of the spectrum, there are drains, people who can, suck the very life force out of your being just by being near them. So there are people who are called mood hoovers, or they are, just drains. I was coaching somebody, and there's a beautiful exchange of ideas in coaching. Yesterday, by the way, you came up with some brilliant phrases that I used overnight. My LinkedIn post today is about optimism because of our experience yesterday. And I just want to congratulate you again for your optimistic business podcast idea. But anyway, back to the radiator and the drain. This chap I was coaching, we were getting on really, really well. And then he gave me this back. And this is real alchemy and gold coming up. This is the idea of a grid matrix. And the axes are dominance versus warmth.
Right.
And what I'd ask you, Rob, and it's clear to me what you are, and it's not a trick question, but to ask your listeners, which of the following 4 sea creatures are you? Remember, it's dominance versus warmth.
Right.
Are you a shark? Are you a dolphin? Are you a jellyfish? Or are you a goldfish? Now, as we know, in the choppy waters of adulthood, there are many, many sharks. People who just are like machines. They get shit done. They're low on empathy. They don't really give a shit. Often the corporate entities love them because they get shit done. But as you know, we're not just machines to get shit done. They're low on empathy. They'll bite you. They might briefly enjoy it while you bleed, but they'll swim on. And there's something a bit sort of in being in there environment because they're cold but dominant.
Yeah.
So already within the matrix of shark, dolphin, jellyfish, goldfish, it's not a trick question. What's the aspirational creature to be? Bearing in mind we've been talking about humility, warmth, and kindness.
Not a shark. Probably a dolphin, I'd imagine.
Get you! Hurrah! You're on fire. The right answer. So we'll come back to the dolphin in a minute. But as we know, there are also people who are a bit sort of jellyfish in life, just drifting around on the tide of their career. They could be as big as washing machines and float about benignly in the Atlantic, like turds in the Atlantic. Or they could be as big as your thumbnail and kill you just by swimming near them because of their tentacles. So it's not necessarily obviously good to be a jellyfish just floating around. Control your destiny, people, or others will control it for you. So on the tide of what's happening, don't just be benign and float about. And then there are goldfish as well, people who just they just absorb oxygen and they don't really give you much. So coming back to the dolphin, the aspirational creature obviously in life is to be a dolphin because they too hunt to kill. I remember I've mentioned already, I'm very, very humble and very, very kind, but now I want to get shit done too. So a dolphin is sociable, it's warm and it's dominant. And then coming back to an earlier riff I was doing on leadership being how you turn up every single day, round about the time of discovering this story, I heard about a comparison of the leadership style in terms of how they make you feel. Back in the day, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, both historical ex-presidents now. But listen to how dolphin-like this punchline is. They give you steel, but with warmth. Steel, but with warmth. And that's what a dolphin can give you. But it's sociable, it's playful, it enjoys life, it frolics. Just on LinkedIn recently, there was a wonderful sort of, a dolphin sort of school invasion almost of them just swimming in 300 or 400 of them doing a sort of spontaneous migration. So anyway, it's a great story about people. You need to, be more dolphin because you'll get stuff done, but remember to be kind to those around you, because everyone is fighting some sort of battle you know absolutely nothing about. And indeed, dolphins have rescued many human beings from shark attacks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing about that sort of concept of this grid is that a lot of people might often mistake it for something that's very fixed, and you either are a dolphin or you aren't. But I think it's very dynamic, and there are some days where certainly, especially before I've been very invested in personal growth, there's been days where I've been a massive shark, and there's been days where I've been a complete goldfish. And the more and more I kind of become introspective about myself, the more I can, like we said, kind of follow a roadmap of an idol, or whatever you're following. It might not even be an idol. It just might be this amazing set of values that you've got in your head. And you kind of work towards that. I think you almost have these days where you're like, sometimes I'm really, really goldfish, and then I'm really shark, and then sometimes I'm jellyfish. But slowly and slowly, as you learn, you almost kind of wave down and follow this line of dolphin, if that makes sense. So you're slowly...
It does. And of course, the sea of change, you know, the metaphor of the sea of change is often storm-fronted, buffeting. You know, how do we keep buoyant and resilience within a sea of change? And it's remembering, yes, it's completely fine to introvert and go into a, you know, a self-conserving, you know, pod of survival within your goldfish bowl occasionally. It's not right or wrong to be any one of these creatures, but it's about where your factory default settings are. If you ultimately default to being more of a dolphin, you'll get a bit more of what you want.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, you know, that's a great point. I love the term factory default setting, because it's almost like when we wake up every day, there's a certain mood we have that continues throughout the day. I don't know if that's just me. I'm sure you've experienced it, Chris, but when everything stops and we're not doing tasks, or we're not necessarily involved with stuff like just going to bed or waking up in the morning or having a pint or a coffee, it depends what your drink of choice is. But yeah, when we stop kind of focusing on one thing specifically, we do resort to that default setting. And I think that's something which I'm sure you probably have more knowledge on than I do, being in acting, is that that's something you almost train your body to do as well as your mind, in a sense.
It's trusting your instincts to fix on a series of rituals and routines that will keep your mental resilience in place. So I'm human, so I haven't always got this. And you know, confidence mantras of themselves are quite interesting. You know my daughter Lily, who's a very good friend of your girlfriend, but Lily's confidence mantra is, I've got this. You know, she'll get up each day, look in the mirror and say, I've got this. She's gorgeous. She hasn't always got this, nor have I, nor have you. But it's just a sort of default, oh, I've got this. In other words, and by the way, in training people on presentation skills, I often say, you know, there's a big fear about public speaking, or a big fear about change. You know, the only human beings, by the way, that actively look forward to change are wet babies. The rest of us find it much, much, much more difficult. But it's this idea of just getting up and contributing and remembering a ritual that will help you. And, you know, my son, who's 13, Stan, and guess why he's called Stan, people? Stan Laurel. I wanted to call Willie Stan, but Janie wasn't having it. But anyway, Stan's mantra is, I'm not a worrier, I'm a warrior. And because we live in Bristol, guess how that sounds? I'm not a warrior, I'm a warrior. It doesn't speak like that, but it's just this idea of, you know, encouraging us to have a confidence mantra in how we get up with the rituals of resilience. So, you know, I mentioned I'm human. During the pandemic, I've slept really weirdly, actually, and I've had lots of existential angst, as we all have. And as we know, my dad, by the way, who's still alive, is in his 80s, once said a few years ago that inside every old person is a young person wondering what the fuck happened. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, however old we are, and I appreciate I'm significantly older than you, but we never actually ever nail it, because the truth of the matter is life is a wicked mess and we're always just winging it. And so there I am during the beginning of the pandemic, waking up thinking, oh my God, everything I've ever done is now completely irrelevant because my phone's not ringing, which reminded me of the trauma of being an actor back in the day, when you've got no control over your career because you're waiting for a third party to deign to ring you up to give you a job that actually may be a bit shit, actually, because you have no control over it. So again, how do we control our own destiny? Don't ask permission to survive. There's just this idea of yes, I can't remember where I've gone now. It's sort of riffed on a theme and just have rituals of resilience that will keep you charting your course and looking for your golden thread is another way of putting this. Within the fog of change or despair, if you just take time to stop, breathe, reflect, somewhere within your vision, your inner genius will help you access the golden thread, which will keep you along the storyline, the through line of your life's journey.
Yes.
Over.
Yeah, I think that is so true, Chris. And in terms of this ethos that we're really focusing on today of not asking permission to get started, I think once you almost realize on an emotional level that actually no one really has a clue what's happening. Like you said, life is a bit of a mess and everyone's winging it. That's a great quote. I'm going to use that.
Well, you just have to think about or notice what the government's doing at the moment. I mean, there was a comedy meme in a Facebook group that I run in one of my choices during lockdown. Because by the way, there has been, and I can tell a story to give a bit more depth to this, but there's been a lot of creative diarrhea I've experienced personally over lockdown because there's been lots and lots of stuff to worry about. But one of the things I was deciding to do was to elevate my comedy side of what I do, because Instant Wit, my comedy improvisation company, the big challenge to that is the theatres went dark, and with the best will in the world, for all the right reasons, the audience pissed off. So how long are you going to wibble onto the darkness before you stop? So we've had to just put ourselves on ice for a bit until we work out what's happening, when we can get back into a live theatre arena. But what I did in the meantime is amplify my comedy muscle, if you like. And there's a Facebook group called #LOLvirus, Spread a Little Happiness, which is just about comedy in adversity. And that was one of my creative diarrhea ideas. I was reading a book, quite a dark book, about the cartel, a beautiful trilogy by Dan Wilmslow about the cartel. If you want to get stuck into a really dark bit of stuff, not that I'm encouraging you to go dark, but within that was an extraordinarily brilliant, during my spurts of creative diarrhea, quote, which is by someone called Rosanna Castellanos, who just happened to be mentioned in the book, which is, we have to laugh because laughter, as we already know, is the first evidence of freedom. And I thought, wow, that's exactly why I need to flex my comedy muscle and get going with a bit of comedy and catharsis. Because if we can laugh when we're in adversity, you're going to get through this. This isn't our first rodeo. Whatever age we are, we've been through change and transition. And, even younger people getting their GCSE and their A-level results, they've been victim to all sorts of government ineffectiveness and, there's no kind way to say this, fuckwittery, really. And it's staggering, the fact they are so obviously winging it and no one people are headless chickens occasionally about how to navigate against the storm of adversity. Other people make better choices. Leaders are people you should want to follow. You can't just say, I'm your leader and expect people to follow you. Absolutely. So who are you and what's the story that you're transmitting? So anyway, the comedy flexing came about because I'd found that quote. And also I heard the expression creative diarrhea during the course of a really fantastic, one of my favorite documentary filmmakers is someone called Louis Theroux, who will be familiar to all of you. And he did a brilliant podcast series during lockdown. Of itself, it's really clever because it's called Grounded. It's because we've all got the same common experience of being grounded in lockdown, but also linked to coaching as I experience it, the idea of how to ground ourselves, how to keep grounded and anchored to what's important, which has been its own challenge as we've been tested extremely in our resilience over this time. But anyway, he, in about episode, I think it was the last one actually, having enjoyed all of it and made all sorts of notes all the way through, it was the Irish actor Chris O'Dowd, who will be familiar to many people. And he said, during lockdown, there's been an awful lot of creative diarrhea, ideas scripting about all over the place. And I heard that and thought, boom, completely get that. And then the comedy thing for me is I'm now happy to report some solids. See what I'm doing there? Because during all the diarrhea, I came up with #LOLvirus, the Facebook group. And because of loving podcasts, I've come up with my own podcast idea, which, by the way, I'm really delighted. When you first got in touch with me, I was slightly bowled over because I had no idea but I was part of your inspiration to get going, which is just so, makes me feel very humble and very grateful for that too, in terms of the laws of reciprocity. And my podcast is called, linked to my coaching joy, What You Need is a Damn Good Listening To, with me, Chris Grimes, because I've always thought that coaching is about giving somebody a damn good listening to. And again, coming into this clearing, which, by the way, you're doing beautifully as well. You're bringing somebody into a space where they can get on the open road of letting their thinking unfold, which is what, true good communication is all about.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about being script bound. Just let your thinking unfold. And so, as we both know, and forgive me going off at lots of tangents, but
that's all right.
It does all make sense. We're both experiencing a completely and utterly different narrative to our conversation yesterday, aren't we?
Yeah. It's the thing is, especially Chris, the fact that you're so experienced in what you do, you've seen many, many, many more lessons than I have. One, my job is for our audience to extract that, but also it comes in a very selfish sense that I'm trying to build my own knowledge, and I genuinely just am trying to learn as much as I can from you on here. So that's a lot of the reason I'm just letting you talk and not shutting you up, really, is because everything you're saying to me makes sense, and I'm learning a lot from it. So,
and what's your story? I mean, just to put you into the sunlight for a second, your own story of how your own Optimistic Business podcast has come about.
Yeah. So to be honest with you, Chris, I just got really pissed off at the fact that the news and broadcasting channels were posting about business and how it's all going to shit. No one's doing well. It's all crashing. Doom and gloom. The world's going to explode by a Death Star in the next 3 days. And yeah, I just felt that there wasn't enough positive media to go against all the negative that we're seeing. So I was like, oh, can someone please just start posting positive stuff? And I was like, actually, why don't I do it and stop complaining about that and just get on with it and bring as much positivity as I can to the table?
Noticing that someone could be me in your case, which is just such a brilliant way to wake up and participate. And rather than just thinking about stuff, in the sands of the gladiatorial arena, just sitting there watching people getting stabbed is sort of, moderately entertaining back in the day. But actually, in life, metaphorically, you need to get up and not go into an arena and start stabbing people, but you've got to tussle in the sand. It's the action towards that's so important, rather than just sitting going, oh, I wish people would be more positive, and then realizing that actually I can galvanize my own sense of positivity and make a difference that way.
Absolutely. I think galvanizing is such a beautiful word there, because especially for me at the start, and I'm sure a lot of other people right now along their journey have loads and loads of ideas, like creative diarrhea, like you said, but until you actually make some solids and galvanizing it, ideas are worth very, very little.
And I read something just last week. I was doing a brilliant sort of bit of personal development connected to something called the Do Lectures, which is worth looking up, an entity that's based in Wales. And there's a really lovely podcaster and ex-musician in Instant Wit, actually, which is why I reconnected with her, called Katie Armitage. And she was running a session about Do Purpose. They're all called Do, clues and title, the Do Lectures, but Do Purpose. And it was a lovely moment where there was a description of the notion of ideas. And ideas, this is some advice to you all. We're bombarded in our psyche, in our mental, landscape with ideas. You need to get rid of your ideas. No, get rid of them, dispose of them, throw them away, give them to other people. No, get rid of them, throw them away. Here comes the punchline. But if you can't throw them away, and like boomerangs, they keep coming back to you, and you can't give them away, then they're obviously yours, and I guess you should get on with them. And if there's an idea you just can't ignore, so in all the creative diarrhea, as I say, the reported solids that we're describing, you're balking at pessimism and thinking, I don't want to do that. Hence, Optimistic Business Podcast is born. And in my case, I'm not competing here, but I'm just talking about two ideas.
Don't worry.
I've got one more idea than you. The hashtag lol virus and the podcast area of What You Need is a Damn Good Listening To. I did have my slightly comedy lens on what was a bit of a creative diarrhea, probably quite shit idea. See what I'm doing there. was I came up with this character, which is called Dave the Oracle. And Dave the Oracle sits there on his oracle as you ascend the mountainside, to sit there with his coronavirus goggles, with his all-seeing, all-knowing wisdom. Ask me anything you like, and Dave will put your world in the pandemic to rights. I posted that a couple of times, and it got absolutely no traction whatsoever. That'll either come back to bite me on the arse as being an idea I should try again, because it actually did. It's not totally ridiculous, but I'd probably put that in the pile of diarrhea rather than the solids that I'm happy to report.
Yeah, I think when you're
fatal flaw with Dave the Oracle is that he was actually touching his own face in the
in the pandemic,
with his own coronavirus goggles. So actually, on balance, he could be a bit shit anyway.
Yeah, well, Chris, lucky for you, when you're even more famous than you are now, I'm sure some random guy, will find it on the internet and make it into a massive meme to spread the funny. Yeah, I had a great point. I've just forgotten it.
That's probably my fault. I'm sorry. I am, I may be difficult to keep up with because I'm just riffing on I'm just off on this.
No, that's okay. Guys, in terms of Chris's wonderful podcast, what you need is a damn good listening to. If you love thoughts laid out in a very clear structure with unbelievable clarity that Chris provides, something that I'm not as good at, although we do have a lot of banter as Chris does, and we have a great chat and we kind of diarrhea out our thoughts and we get there. Chris has unbelievable clarity with his podcast at the moment on LinkedIn, so I very highly recommend that you check it out. If you're looking for those really quick ideas to come to you during the day, go listen to Chris. He will provide the value that you are hungry for.
And by the way, my lovely, gorgeous gazelle, giraffe, swan of a daughter, who I know you know very well, she has done a parody podcast called Welcome to Lily G's Crib, where she just fundamentally rips the piss out of me by, talking about my clearing. And, she just very deftly does a much, much, much more attractive version of me and takes the piss out of me. If you can laugh at yourself, by the way, that's another really important life skill. You've got to have a sense of humor, and you've got to be willing to take it as well as give it if you want to get into the realm of really good navigation.
Absolutely.
Well, I just realised my name here is wrong in what we're filming. I'm not Melanie at APAC, so it doesn't matter. That's just because we're going to do a WAV file anyway.
Yeah, that is funny. I'm going to start calling you Melanie.
Hello, Melanie at APAC.
Yeah,
Melanie, my weekend name.
I was going to say you've almost got the hair for it, but not quite yet.
Thank you. But thank you for your lovely positivity and warmth and optimism that you're very good at. You are very good at giving it out too. So and also you're really good at asking questions and making this feel really safe to riff on a theme of talking. So
thank you. Yeah, I think something I've learned very quickly is that whilst I'm still very young, I like to taste a lot of different things. Like I used to be really good at maths, but I got bored of that. So I started on business, and then there's been other stuff like that. But once I start learning something, I almost try to learn enough so I know how to ask the experts the right questions. Then I either keep going with it if I really love it, or just, I'm like, I know what to ask someone who's better than me here. So I'm good. I can keep working on what I love.
And it's always really good as a general principle, which I'm still learning to this day, is to surround yourself with people who are already doing what you're doing, but maybe they're even more ahead of it, ahead of the curve. And then that way you can all play catch up. All that's required there is the generosity on the part of the person that's already got some of that. So surrounding yourself with a tribe of maybe 5 people who can help you amplify and get even better at what you're currently doing is a really good thing.
Absolutely. And that's actually not always as easy as it sounds in terms of a culture thing, because if you're surrounding yourself with people who are much, much better than you, or even just a little bit better than you, you've got to throw your ego right in the bin, because you can't you know, you may have different ideas to them, but you can't say you're better and try and tell them what to do, because
I mean, in fact, really importantly to qualify, people who are just more experienced, you know, we often kowtow to seniority when we go into the corporate culture. And you know, we should never seek permission from others or validation from others. It's not that they're better. They might have just had a bit more flying hours in the cockpit of whatever it is they're doing. So, yeah. And by the way, and another really lovely thing is the notion of genius. You know, in life, if we perceive, in ancient Greek times, there was this notion that it was much more helpful. It's a real burden to be in life. I'm not talking about either of us here, but just the notion of genius. It's a real burden to be bestowed with the mantle of genius. And actually, in ancient Greek times, it was more that you weren't a genius, but you had a genius, as if it was an attendant demon or daemon to you. That was a sprite that was put here to probably piss you off a bit, because it's always trying to pull you on for your ideas. So how do you become the vessel to realize your genius? And back to acting, what I love the most about acting, in terms of actors I liked, is those that spend their time on stage trying to make the other actors look and feel good. So how do you make others look good? And so it's much more about generosity, and actually, you know, like actors, rather than being selfish, look at me and how awesome I am, it's how the best actors can actually interpret the voice of the author to tell the story, because it's the story that's really important to tell, not how awesome you might be. So this isn't an arrogant thing to think, you know, people are better or I'm not worthy. You know, we've just not been in. And the notion of genius that I'm coming on to say is, genius happens because you're willing to spend longer than anybody else in that particular arena that you've decided to concentrate on. So, you know, back to you, only 3 episodes into this podcast, you know, you'll have, if you listen to episode 1 versus 3, I happen to be on about episode 13. Podcasts are new to me too, but I'm already knowing or noticing a gear change in, we're getting more comfortable in this arena, therefore it will get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think linking that point of not necessarily asking permission, not necessarily, obviously, you know, that's our whole ethos today, is don't ask permission to be yourself and attack, and, you know, don't worry about the authority, but still glean from them. The kind of idea that I have when I think about people who are more experienced than me is just, again, no one had any clue about the world at the start, and they just kind of turned up to more days. Like they've been, like you said, they've been in the pond a bit longer than you. And to be honest, they've just made all the mistakes that you're about to make. So it's good to learn about their, you know, metaphorical scars, so you can either avoid them altogether, or when they do come to you, you have more perspective of what that actually means and how you can roll with the punches.
Absolutely. And, you know, youth, as we know, is the future. There's a really profound arc of people's career trajectory, which I learned from somebody recently who came to one of the comedy improvisational things I do in the southwest of France, called lessuranglais.com, which is a comedy improvisational masterclass thing that I am lucky enough to do. But it was someone who said a career trajectory, you know, using your name is, okay, who's Rob Williams? As in, no one's heard of him. And then suddenly, oh, get me Rob Williams. And then, and we come to my time in life. So we've had, who's Rob Williams? Get me Rob Williams. Oh, shit, get me a younger version of Rob Williams. And then eventually, who's Rob Williams? So our age difference, if you think about it, you're in your early 20s, I'm gathering. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I absolutely not. I am 20 exactly.
Boom. And I'm going to be significantly older than that, shall we say. I'm 57, going to be 58 soon. So think about that arc. You know, who's Chris Grimes? Get me Chris Grimes. Get me a younger version of Chris Grimes. Who the fuck's Chris Grimes? And that's just what we're all up against. So our moment in the sunshine is really important for you to seize. Carpe diem. And by the way, if you take one thing away from listening to this podcast, not you, Rob, this is for the listeners, I'd like to offer you, if I may, a promotion as of today. Whatever it says on your business card. And by the way, I once came home with a business card to Lily when I was being an associate with a company called Working Voices, which I still work with to this day. And it said, interpersonal communication skills consultant. And Lily sort of looked at it and went, well, you know, good luck with that. And then she got on with her day. So it's sort of meaningless what our job title is. But what I'd like to give you now is a new mantle. Whatever it says on your business card, rip it up. And as of now, you should be global head of yourself. Boom. Which links to my favorite quote about how to give ourselves self-advocacy. and it's been my favorite way of helping people with confidence, is to say to the world, and it's to echo with something you said at the very beginning of our talk together now, which is to say to the world, I am Spartacus.
Mm.
You don't have to go, I am Spartacus. You can do some of that sometime. But it's so interesting how so many people, because confidence is something that really, really pulls us down with something called our imposter syndrome. Our inner child that worries that someday we're always going to get found out, or almost going to get found out. But this idea that a lot of people say to the world, am I Spartacus? Do you mind if I'm Spartacus? I'm kind of Spartacus. So instead it's, I am Spartacus. Now, in a nutshell, I give myself permission. Don't wait or seek permission to survive. What can I do to make a difference? How can I be more Spartacus? Mm. And it's just a really lovely way to just, I suppose, rather comically land the idea of how to go about, self-advocating, as it's called.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially in today's society, where we have so much focus on kindness and sharing, which is amazingly great, it's often a point where people forget to do the I am Spartacus, and forget to give themselves permission, that they don't necessarily focus on growing themselves before they go out and help as many other people as they can. Whilst helping is always great and typically gives great results, like being kind and everything, the fact is, if I almost say it in an analogy, is that you can't really, if you're a fountain and you're empty or only half full, you can't then, fizzle out water from the top and fill all the other fountains surrounding you, because you're not full yourself. So if you really, from my standpoint, I almost need to be a little bit selfish to grow myself, so that in the future, once I'm, a better version of myself, I've kind of molted my shell or my furs and grown, is that I can then spread my either knowledge or mindset and be the example for other people to follow, much like Stan was for you. And I think the best gift we can often give people is just to be the example for them.
I love that. That's beautifully put. Absolutely that. The fountain analogy is lovely. Really, really nice.
Yeah, I heard that off someone and I can't remember who. So that's not me, but I thought it was.
By the way, just today in our garden, we went on holiday quickly and then got caught in the vortex of coming back from France a bit late. So we're in lockdown at the moment, #awkward. But we left behind some sunflower seeds, and there are 7 in a pot, 3 of which have gone and have actually gone, oh shit, and are waning now. And there are 2 just coming up that are right on the cusp of going, da-da! And you can tell that they're absolutely, and they're in a circle, interestingly, coming full circle to what we're talking about, but you can tell they're absolutely brimming and charged with potential. Their moment in the sunshine is about to happen. And, they are just as valid as every single one of those sunflowers in the pot. They just happen to be the youngest ones there. And in fact, who are the ones that we're most envious of at this point? The young ones, because they've still got it all to come.
Well, possibly not me, but maybe.
Just as an analogy, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Chris, especially with your whole expertise working with Second Curve, you're very astute to the idea of people who are starting to, on that, like you said, you had this talk like, who's Chris Grimes? Oh, we need Chris Grimes. We need a younger version of Chris Grimes. I think you're very much astute to the idea of that people here often lose that sense of self-worth, and that's almost your goal with your whole coaching ethos, is to help those people rediscover themselves and their value that they can bring to the table.
And coaching's about nudging. Sometimes it's just giving the right powerful questions to sort of nudge them along their way. And yes, we can all, our mojo can suddenly take a dent at any point in your life. There've been huge challenges to us all, as we know, in this pandemic. And, I too have had all sorts of existential angst in this time, because, the whole model of how I used to go about, hunter-gathering has changed forever, probably. But out of adversity comes great creativity, and it's not over until it's over. And another friend of mine, a coach who I really respect, talked about how, in the sort of window of a timeline in your life's work, although the pandemic is like, whoa, it's going to pass. And over there, hopefully I'll live well into my 90s. Maybe I'm going to live forever, actually. I'm the first person that's ever going to manage that. When I'm 170, it won't be over until it's over. So it ain't over yet.
Yeah.
It's not over until it's over.
Quite right. I think if we go back to that thing about adversity and how it's a very small part, I think often although it is small, it's often like kind of putting popcorn in a pressure cooker, right? Because all this pressure, COVID, is scream. I don't think you can cook popcorn by screaming at it. Last I checked, but you never know. But yeah, kind of putting a whole bag of your popcorn, your self-value and ideas in a bag, it can either just fizzle and the seeds blow up and it doesn't cook very well, or if you put it on the right temperature and make sure you cook it properly and actually be very self-aware during times of crisis and difficult times, you often find that you experience a lot more growth than you would in times of normality.
Yes, and hence the adage, out of adversity comes great creativity. It's looking for the golden thread, looking for I suppose, the seam of alchemy and the seam of gold that can still be prevalent even in dark times, like comedy in adversity. Or, interestingly, my Second Curve Zoom room, which is my online coaching proposition that people, I'm not telling you, I'm just telling you about it. Interestingly, I got going with that about 11 months ago, before the pandemic. So that was just me thinking, what can I do also? Because I think the world's changing. I had no idea how the world was changing. But interestingly, when the pandemic happened and Zoom exploded into being, and here we are doing a podcast on Zoom, which is fantastic. Initially, I thought, oh gosh, people are going to think I'm just jumping on a bandwagon here. But actually, my wagon's been going longer than the pandemic. So I'm starting to sort of put it out there again as saying, look, I can actually help because I too am human and I've got perspective. And I can help using optimism, coming back to your main favourite word, using humour. And I love the use of storytelling, metaphor and analogy. I love your metaphor just now about the pressure cooker of popcorn.
Yeah.
By the way, there is a slightly comic, slightly risque story about popcorn. When we first took Stan, very young, to the cinema, and he was given his first experience of the big screen, and as we were walking out, he was just bathed in what a glorious experience that had been, and he loved it. The Coke that he got, the popcorn that he had, and he was walking out, and Janie and I were just walking straight ahead, and he went, "Oh, do you know what? I love cock porn." Going, we better not Google that, but yeah, good. We'll get you some more next time. Hashtag. It's one of those beautiful parenting moments where you just go, keep on swimming, keep on swimming. And by the way, keep on swimming is, now we've got over the Stan and cock porn or story. Keep on swimming has been one of my favourite quotes during the pandemic, which is to borrow from Dory from Finding Nemo, where in the film, I Googled the YouTube clip where Dory goes up to Nemo's dad and says, "Oh, hello, Mr. Grumpy Gills," and then says, "Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming." And even though she's got absolutely no short-term memory retention whatsoever, she's a bit of a goldfish in that vernacular. But in times of adversity, remember, it's not over. This too shall pass, to borrow a biblical quote, and this too shall pass. So my encouragement, and in fact, how I've decided to navigate through the pandemic, even though a lot of my work, honestly, went off the cliff initially. I talked about instant wit and the audience going off. There are, the company I work for, Working Voices, they were like a beached whale because they had this, huge global presence, but clients were cancelling stuff overnight. So for a while, we were sort of splashing water into the metaphorical blowhole to try and pull it back into the water. But what I've decided to do is just to keep my compass pointing true north. Good work leads to good work. It's all about the relationship, stupid. Just keep swimming. And if you do good work, people will come back to you. And I would like to impart that as a bit of resilient self-awareness. And I'm in a point where it hasn't fully come back to me yet, but I know that it will, because I'm still doing and transmitting stuff that can be helpful to people.
Absolutely. And I think, prophets are only famous after their truths come true. So in a sense, Chris, it's very wise to say that now because of your past experiences. You're very aware of what's going to happen. And I think it's great that you can say that not only to make yourself look very clever in about 3 months' time, but also to act as a beacon for other people who might not have had that yet, that eureka moment.
And by the way, to that lovely, thank you for saying the word beacon, the idea that, during the pandemic, it's Birmingham University you're at doing your business degree, isn't it?
Yes.
And rather than just sort of, metaphorically being on university furlough whilst you sit around waiting for it to get its act together as to whether it's going to do it online or in person, are you about to start your second year or your third year?
Third year.
And by the way, what you're doing is so brilliant as your future employability about your get up and go optimism. So again, congratulations. But, metaphorically during this time, if you've been furloughed, there's a slight danger, and there's nothing wrong with being furloughed, but it's a very difficult situation to be in because actually that makes you a bit of a jellyfish because you've proved you're not a key worker and you're floating off not being essential. So what you've got to do is make sure that as a remote satellite, as a beacon, you've got to keep, transmitting your signal and beaking Majestic back to the mothership of whatever entity you're in to make yourself indispensable. Or wake up and smell the coffee and realize I've got to be a dolphin and swim somewhere else. Because
Absolutely.
People must know that, if there are, just 2 weeks ago, there was something like 650,000 more people in unemployment in this country. So there will be people who must be within that swarm of jellyfish thinking, shit, I've got to swim somewhere else. Also, I haven't solved all of this because I've been, struggling with my own oscillations of how to make sense of all this. But this idea of beaconing Majestic is really important, I think. So be clear about who you are and what's the story that you're transmitting. Swim towards what you want. State your truth without unwarranted doubt. The world's not psychic. If you don't say what you want, they're not going to give it to you. And interestingly, I was playing tennis, which has been my savior. Two things. My bike is my freedom. So Stan and I have been on our bikes an awful lot. And also tennis has been fantastic during the lockdown because it's just this lovely mindfulness of not being in my own headspace, but just twatting a ball about, which has been fantastically cathartic. But interestingly, I've been playing tennis with a guy who's a pilot for EasyJet. And one of the best books I know about change is a beautiful analogy and a metaphor, which is called Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know if you've heard about it before.
Yeah.
But Who Moved My Cheese is just a brilliant thing about how we react to change. And what's really interesting is the guy from EasyJet, who's a lovely chap and a really nice tennis player and lovely chap, but he's just griping about the fact that they're now, making it all unionized and he's been on furlough and he's not. But, you don't, if you need to smell the cheese because, with no planes in the sky or far fewer, obviously, there are going to be far, far, far fewer pilots needed. So what are you going to do? You need to do something different. So it's not that he's necessarily going to lose his job, but he does need to keep swimming and he's got to be clear about where he wants to swim to.
Absolutely.
And again, I'm not there to solve it, nor am I coaching him, but it's just interesting how we can just observe people around you and how adaptive they are or not to change.
Yeah. And I think on the back of that, it's also a great opportunity for those who have been in a job that they haven't enjoyed as much. This sense of change and unemployment is a great opportunity to look around and, smell the cheese and find out actually, where do I want to go with my life? At any age, you can do that if you're 60 or 15, it doesn't matter. That's something you can always change.
Well, full circle, as we know, we've talked about confidence and the nature of it or the notion of it. And of course, my only trick question whenever I'm coaching or training is what's the right age do we think to be confident? And people go, in the 70s, there was this beer mat thing you could get, which is called a round to it. And you'd put it on your desk and I'll do this when I've got around to it. I'll do this when I've got around to it. In other words, we defer getting on and doing stuff because we're waiting for some mystical thing to give us the round to it, when I get around to it. So the time is now. So of course the punchline is, sorry if it took a while to land that, but the right age to be confident, guess what, is now. Stan's 13, be confident. He amazed me recently. An adult arrived at the tennis court, new to the club, and rather than Stan going, oh, an adult, new to the club, he shouted from 20 feet, hello, I'm Stan, you're new to the club, hello. And he went to bash rackets with them. And then he turned to me and he went, that's confidence right there. And I went, parenting goals right there. So I was really
Yeah.
proud of the moment because he knew he was, because by the way, full circle, confidence is the most attractive attribute of leadership. And we're all leaders. There's a nice quote, which is, "Psst, the secret's out. We're all leaders." So you came to me assuming I was more experienced than you, Rob, but you are being a brilliant example of leadership from within in your own, you're an expert in your own perception, an expert in your own experience. You've gone into the gladiatorial sands and you are tussling about to get shit done. You're being a leader. And so, confidence is the most attractive attribute of leadership, and the age to be confident is now. Borrowed from a lovely Dr. Seuss quote, which is, "The time has come, the time is now. Marvin K. Mooney, would you please go now?" And by the way, one of my favorite Be Silly books to get people to use more energy when they're communicating is called Fox in Socks and Other Stories by Dr. Seuss. It's full of really lovely nonsense.
That sounds bloody brilliant. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've just cut you off your nonsense train there, unfortunately.
It's stuff like, "Try to say this, please. Through 3 cheese trees, 3 free fleas flew. And while these fleas flew, Freezy Breeze blew. And Freezy Breeze made these cheese trees cheese freeze. And that's what made these 3 free fleas sneeze." Of itself, a load of old bollocks. But actually, if you think about it, I still managed to make sense of it and use more energy so that it's communication skills is an athletic activity. And it's remembering to have fun and enjoy yourself when you're interacting with others. And that's what reciprocity is about. That's what energy is all about. That's how you're going to get much more of what you want. Energy is the entire elixir of how you're going to connect.
Absolutely. And I think I love that prefix, remembering to remember, because there's often things we know and we know we should be doing, but we don't in the moment engage with it as you might do.
Your inner genius at work again then. Remembering to remember is, what's my inner genius telling me? There is a version of you that knows exactly what to do if you can find it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole message for day. What's happened in the last 3 seconds? Chris, you've nonsense me out. Yeah. No, guys, for today, just remember, as Chris has so kindly imparted on us, don't ask permission. And let your inner genius believe in itself, because it's in there, and keep fucking going, really. Just crack on, do the work. Yeah.
Going. And your inner genius, remember, it's like an attendant demon or daemon. In the Philip Pullman book, His Dark Materials, there was I thought it was quite crap, the thing on television, but the idea of a demon, this attendant sprite, I feel I've got a miniature Stan Laurel always perched on the edge of the desk, reminding me that it'll be okay because, hey, it's okay to be silly.
Yeah, not a ferret or a possum, just a Stan Laurel.
Ferrets are nice, possums are nice. I mean, choose your own animal. You don't. So what do you want down your trousers all day? I'll have a ferret, please. They've got both teeth.
Oh, that is funny. Right, guys, I think that's a great place to call it. Thanks for coming on, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, after we lost the first recording, we've had a lot of fun again. You are very inspiring to talk to, and as you are a comedian, it's been bloody hilarious. Unsurprisingly, I'm going to dub you that the funniest person on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Yeah, well, I think it's true. You're the funniest person I've certainly seen on LinkedIn.
Can I do a plug of the various URLs people can look at if they want to?
Absolutely, yeah.
So because I'm a drama teacher, an actor, and a comedy improvisation performer by training and background, you can look at the various portfolio ideas, but they've all conjoined. My dad, when I was about 19 years old, said, "Son, if you want to be an actor, be a teacher first, and that'll give you something to fall back on." Now, as we know, parental advice is either good, bad, shit, or indifferent, and we often spend much energy you can swimming in exactly the opposite direction. But actually, my dad's still alive. He's in his mid-80s, and I've been able to tell him what profoundly wonderful advice that was, because I still use all of those transferable skills, and it now manifests in my coaching proposition, which is called secondcurve.uk. My comedy improvisation company is called instantwit.co.uk. I do workshops, comedy improvisation works in France once a year, surrounded on 3 sides by sunflowers. That's www.lessuranglais.com, the French translation of the English sisters.com. So there's an S on the end there, lessuranglais.com. And my own Chris Grimes personal acting website, which is a bit sort of legacy now because I've sort of moved away from uploading stuff to that. It's chrisgrimes.uk, and you can check me out on LinkedIn, Twitter, and all those sheblangs as well. But anyway, Rob, thank you so much. You've been a joy to let my thinking unfold to.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to have, I'm sure, a lot more crazy conversations in the future, which I can't wait.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
And
right,
good
guys.
luck with the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I can't wait for episode 4, which I don't know who it's with yet, but we'll see.
Hope it won't be me because we've forgotten to record.
Yeah, no, that would be awful. Oh, let me check. Okay, it says stop recording, so that's a good sign. All right, guys, thanks for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. We will see you in the next one. Bye from me and bye from Chris.
Why?